Imagine waking up to the sound of screeching tires outside your own home, only to rush out and find your $250,000 Lamborghini Huracan spinning out of control at the end of your street. The roar of the engine, the smell of burning rubber, the horrifying crunch of metal against a lamppost, it all happened in a split second. And the worst part? The kid behind the wheel wasn't a thief off the street. He wasn't some stranger. No. It was my neighbor's 17-year-old son, Tyler, the same kid who strutted around the neighborhood bragging about how rules didn't apply to him because his mom ran the HOA. I stood there frozen as smoke poured out of the hood of my car, glass littering the pavement like confetti. My heart sank. My Lamborghini, the pride and joy I had worked years to afford, was crumpled like a soda can. And Tyler? He stumbled out of the driver's seat laughing, as if destroying my dream car was just another one of his stupid teenage stunts. But what came next? That's what turned this from a tragedy into a full-blown war. Because Tyler's mother, Linda, the president of our HOA, actually marched up my driveway that same night, looked me dead in the eye, and told me this was my fault. She demanded I cover the damages. She even wanted me to lie to the police to protect her son. That's when I realized I wasn't just dealing with an entitled teenager. I was staring down the most corrupt, power-drunk HOA president you could possibly imagine. And let me tell you, she picked the wrong neighbor to mess with. What started as a totaled Lamborghini turned into a battle that shook the entire community, exposed years of abuse, and ended with police officers dragging the so-called Queen of Willow Creek out of her own HOA meeting in handcuffs. But before I tell you how it all went down, how a luxury car, a spoiled teenager, and a power-hungry mom brought an entire NEA, each bore hood to its knees, I've got one small favor to ask. If you love hearing wild, unbelievable HOA revenge stories like this, make sure you hit that like button and subscribe to the channel. Trust me, you won't want to miss what happens next. You know, if someone had asked me 2 years ago how my Lamborghini story would end, I would have said something cliché. Maybe I'd overcooked a corner on a track day, spun out, and kissed a guardrail. Or maybe I'd get too enthusiastic at a car meet and misjudge a speed bump. Something dumb. Something clearly my fault, but nothing earth-shattering. What I never in a million years imagined was watching that car reduced to a mangled carcass because of a smug teenager with more ego than brains. And not just any random punk either. No, this kid had a VIP pass to entitlement. He was the son of our HOA president. Let me rewind, because this whole thing didn't start with twisted metal. It started the day I moved into Willow Creek Estates. To me, it was paradise. Wide, tree-lined streets, oversized garages that gleamed like airplane hangars, the kind of cul-de-sac where every driveway looked like an ad for suburban success. Perfect for me, a guy who'd spent decades as a systems architect breaking my back over spaghetti code written by people who must have thought keyboards were percussion instruments. When I finally cashed out, I told myself, reward those sleepless nights, buy something beautiful. And I did. A pearl green Lamborghini Huracan. To me, that car wasn't just a machine. It was sculpture, a rolling masterpiece of Italian design. I babied it. Climate-controlled garage, detailed weekly. I only took it out for weekend cruises or car meets where people actually respected machinery. No obnoxious revving at midnight, no racing down suburban streets, just pride in something I'd earned. But here's the thing about certain neighborhoods. It doesn't matter if you're considerate. Sometimes just having something beautiful paints a target on your back. And my target had a name, Linda. Now, her real name wasn't Linda, but for the sake of this story, we'll call her that. Linda as our HOA president. And if you've ever met someone who thrives on control like it's oxygen, you already know the type. She was the queen bee of rules, white Range Rover, clipboard welded to her hand, and a permanent sour milk expression like she'd smelled something rotten in the air. Her armor was Lululemon, her battlefield was everyone's property lines, and her weapons were passive-aggressive notes tucked into mailboxes. My very first run-in with her was over something stupid. Trash bins. Mine had been visible from the street for maybe 45 minutes longer than the guidelines allowed. She swooped down like a hawk. I laughed it off, thought, okay, this is just the price of living in a manicured neighborhood, but that was just her opening act. From the moment she spotted the Lamborghini tucked into my garage, I swear she decided it was her personal crusade to make me miserable. I'll never forget the first time she saw me polishing it. She stopped mid-jog, leaned on the mailbox post like she owned it, and in her syrupy, fake sweet voice said, "Quite the flashy ride for such a quiet neighborhood, don't you think?" I smiled politely and said, "It makes me happy, and it doesn't make a sound when I stick to the speed limit." Her lips pressed into a thin line like I'd spat on her sidewalk. That's when I knew I was on her radar. And then there was her son, Tyler, 17, a walking red flag. He had that smug grin teenagers wear when they think they're untouchable, always surrounded by a pack of wannabe tough guys who loitered at the gas station like it was a nightclub. Everyone knew he was trouble, spray-painted walls, borrowing bikes, sneaking beer into the park, and every single time, Linda swooped in with the same line, "Boys will be boys. No accountability, no consequences, just excuses." Tyler wasn't misunderstood. Tyler was a delinquent in training believed rules were optional for him. Still, I figured his nonsense was everyone else's problem, until one night proved otherwise. I was out of town at a conference catching up with old colleagues when at 2 in the morning my phone buzzed. Caller ID, Mr. Callahan, my elderly neighbor. His voice was shaking. "Ethan, you need to come back. There's been an accident with your green car." My stomach dropped. "What do you mean, accident?" He wouldn't say much, only that it was bad. That word echoed in my skull the entire drive home. I didn't sleep, didn't eat, just shoved everything into a suitcase and hit the road, my brain spinning in a fog of dread. By the time I pulled into Willow Creek, dawn was bleeding across the sky. And there it was, my Lamborghini, or what used to be my Lamborghini, crumpled around a telephone pole 3 blocks from my house. The pearl green paint was still visible, but now it was stretched and torn across twisted metal like a cruel joke. Airbags burst like party streamers. One wheel ripped completely off. It didn't even look like a car anymore. It looked like the aftermath of a transformer losing a fistfight. And standing beside the wreck was Sergeant Matthews, arms crossed, expression grim. That's when the truth dropped. Tyler had broken into my garage. He'd found the valet key I kept hidden. He'd taken my Lamborghini on a joyride through residential streets, witnesses saying he was fishtailing like he thought he was in a Fast Furious audition tape. Physics caught up with him faster than he expected. He wrapped my car around that pole. The miracle? Tyler and his 2 idiot passengers walked away with just scratches and bruises. My car, however, was dead on arrival. I was furious, heartbroken, but I told myself, at least the cops have him. He'll face the music. Then I remembered who his mother was. Linda. And that's when a colder kind of dread set in, because Linda wasn't the apologizing type. Linda was the cover-it-up type. And sure enough, she showed up at my due, or hours later, dragging her exhausted husband like baggage, ready to spin the story into something that would make me the villain. And that's where the real war began. When I opened the door that morning, still numb from staring at the wreckage of what used to be my dream car, Linda was already there. She wasn't in her jogger uniform this time. No. She came dressed like she'd just stepped off a courtroom drama set. Pressed blouse, pearl necklace, hair pulled back so tight it looked like it hurt. Beside her was her husband, Henry, quiet man, kind of guy whose shoulders slumped permanently, as though the weight of living with Linda had slowly compressed his spine. "Mr. Kane," she began, her voice sharp and rehearsed, "we need to discuss this unfortunate incident." Unfortunate incident. That's how she described her son breaking into my garage, stealing my Lamborghini and totaling it. Unfortunate incident? I echoed, staring at her in disbelief. Your son stole my car, a $400,000 car, and destroyed it. She waved her hand like I'd overreacted to spilled milk. Let's not exaggerate. Tyler made a youthful mistake. He wasn't stealing. He was borrowing. Borrowing. The word snapped something in me. My voice came out sharp. He broke into my garage. He had no permission. He took it, wrecked it. That's grand theft auto. The police agree. Her lips curved into that smug smirk she wore like a crown. The police are overreacting. Tyler is a good boy, and frankly, if you're going to flaunt such a flashy vehicle, you should expect this kind of problem. It's practically an attractive nuisance. Attractive nuisance. She said it as if my Lamborghini was the equivalent of a swimming pool with no fence, as if I had invited temptation just by owning it. I actually laughed, a bitter, humorless laugh. You're seriously blaming me for your son's crime. I'm saying, she leaned in closer, her voice dropping to a faux conspiratorial whisper, this has been very traumatic for my family. And since it was your car and your insurance, we expect you to cover the damages quietly, maybe even tell the police you lent it to him, so his future isn't ruined. I blinked at her, stunned. Let me get this straight. Your son steals my Lamborghini, totals it, and you want me to not only pay for the damages but lie to the police to protect him? Her smirk widened like I had just proven her point. Exactly. It's sensible. Think of it as a contribution to community harmony. Community harmony. That was her sales pitch. My blood boiled so hot I thought I'd burst. Linda, there's no way in hell I'm pressing charges. And if you ever suggest I lie to law enforcement again, maybe you should look up what obstruction of justice carries as a penalty. That got her. Her face twisted into something sharp and venomous. She screeched, voice cutting like nails on glass. You're the problem in this neighborhood. You'll regret this. She spun on her heel, pearls rattling, dragging Henry with her as if he were luggage. That was the moment I knew. This wasn't going to be a mistake her son paid for. This was going to be war. And sure enough, the retaliation began almost immediately. It started small. A notice in my mailbox claiming my grass was a half-inch too long. I laughed, mowed the lawn, documented the whole thing with photos. A week later, another violation. My mailbox was faded. I snapped pictures, dated them, sent them back with a letter drafted by my attorney, Ellie Harper. She was the kind of lawyer you wanted on your side. Sharp, strategic, with a dry sense of humor that turned stress into ammunition. An attractive nuisance. She chuckled darkly when I told her. A locked Lamborghini in a climate-controlled garage. This woman is Prara, actively writing her own obituary. Legally speaking, document everything, every notice, every interaction. Trust me, this is going to be gold later. So I did. Every violation that hit my mailbox, I photographed, timestamped, responded to in writing. And the more I pushed back, the more Linda ramped it up. A stone in my driveway was the wrong shade. My garbage can was too close to the curb. She even sent me a warning that the wind chimes hanging on my porch weren't within HOA guidelines. But something unexpected happened in the middle of this petty storm. Neighbors started reaching out, quietly at first, in hushed tones. Mrs. Gomez, who lived 2 streets over, confessed that Linda had forced her to repaint her front door 3 times because it wasn't the right shade of blue. Another neighbor, Dan, told me Linda had blocked his request for solar panels, coincidentally, right after he'd turned down her brother-in-law's roofing company. It was like peeling back wallpaper and finding rot underneath. Story after story painted a picture of Linda using her HOA presidency as a personal sledgehammer. For years, people had just endured it because she was relentless, because fighting her meant endless fines, threats, and public shaming. But now they saw someone standing up to her. And I wasn't just standing, I was digging in. The funny thing about people like Linda is that they thrive on intimidation. As long as everyone cowers, they're untouchable. But the second someone pushes back, cracks start to show. And once those cracks appear, everyone who's been quietly suffering starts to realize they don't have to take it anymore. That's exactly what began to happen in Willow Creek Estates. At first, it was just whispers. Neighbors stopping me while I polished what was left of my driveway, leaning in as if they were sharing state secrets. Hey, Ethan, don't tell Lind. I said this, but she made us repaint the shutters twice. Said the green we chose looked too aggressive. Can you believe that? My cousin's a contractor. He put in a bid for community landscaping but didn't get it. Guess who did? Her brother-in-law. Every story added another log to the bonfire. I documented it all, with Ellie coaching me on what would be useful later. She was like a general, strategizing a war. Keep receipts, she told me. Emails, texts, even the ridiculous violation notices. The pettier, the better. Juries love pettiness. It paints character. And she was right. The pettiness was almost comical. At one point, Linda sent me a formal violation for having a shadow cast from my oak tree onto the sidewalk that obstructed the aesthetic continuity of the neighborhood. A shadow. I framed that one just for the absurdity. Meanwhile, Tyler wasn't hiding in shame like any sane kid would after wrapping a Lamborghini around a pole. No, he was bragging, posting online about how he'd done something legendary. Screenshots of his messages circulated among his peers, all hyping him up like he was some rebel hero. What he didn't realize was that Ellie had already hired someone to archive every single post. Legendary? Perfect, Ellie said when I showed her. That's intent. That's premeditation. He wasn't joyriding on a whim, he was chasing clout. The neighborhood simmered with tension, and everyone knew the annual HOA meeting was coming. Normally, it was a dull event with half-empty chairs, bored homeowners half listening to budget reports. But this year, it was shaping up to be a showdown. People who hadn't attended in years were whispering about showing up just to watch the fireworks. Linda, of course, acted like nothing was wrong. She strutted around the neighborhood with her usual air of superiority, Range Rover gleaming, clipboard at the ready. But if you looked closely, you could see it. A twitch at the corner of her mouth, her husband trailing further behind, looking more defeated than ever. Tyler skulking around like a king without a throne, his friends treating him like a local celebrity, while the adults in the neighborhood muttered under their breath. I wasn't sitting idle either. Ellie and I were preparing a 1-2 punch. First, an independent audit of the HOA's finances. We'd heard enough rumors of misallocated funds to know something smelled. Second, motions to reform the way violations were enforced. And finally, the big swing, a vote of no confidence in Linda as HOA president. But here's the thing, I didn't just want her voted out, I wanted her exposed. I wanted everyone to see her for what she was. And for that, I needed undeniable proof of her corruption. That's when fate handed me a gift. Late one night, I was organizing the endless pile of violation notices she'd sent me when my doorbell rang. It was Dan, the solar panel guy. He looked nervous, glancing over his shoulder before stepping inside. "I've got something you might want to see," he whispered, sliding a folder onto my kitchen table. Inside were invoices, lots of them, all addressed to the HOA. But the services? Dinners at five-star restaurants, spa treatments, even maintenance on a Range Rover. "She's been funneling HOA funds into her own lifestyle," Dan said. "I know because my cousin used to handle the bookkeeping before she quit in disgust. She kept copies of everything. And now, well, now it's yours." I stared at the folder like it was dynamite. Because in a way, it was. This wasn't just petty fines or overreach. This was theft, fraud, the kind of thing that didn't just get you booted from an HOA board, it got you arrested. Ellie nearly laughed when I called her. "Oh, Ethan, you realize what this means? We're not just going to kick her off the throne, we're going to burn the throne down." The countdown to the HOA meeting had officially begun. The days leading up to the annual HOA meeting felt like waiting for a storm everyone knew was coming. You could feel it in the air, that restless buzz where people half smiled at each other but whispered behind closed doors. For the first time in years, Willow Creek's quiet cul-de-sacs weren't just manicured lawns and cookie-cutter smiles. They were a battlefield waiting for the first cannon fire. Linda carried on like nothing was wrong. Every morning, she paraded down the street in her Range Rover, pearl earrings glinting, clipboard in hand. If you didn't know better, you'd think she was the happiest queen in the world. But I'd seen cracks in her mask, the twitch of her mouth when someone didn't wave, the way her eyes darted when neighbors avoided her. She could feel her grip slipping, even if she'd never admit it. Tyler, meanwhile, acted like he'd just won a championship. He strutted around, his little posse trailing behind him, bragging about how he pushed a Lambo to its limits. Kids whispered about it at the bus stop. Parents muttered angrily at the park. It was surreal, like watching someone light matches in a fireworks factory while their mother insisted everything was under control. But while Linda and Tyler clung to their delusions, I was preparing my case like I was heading into court myself. Ellie worked with me almost every evening. My kitchen table became command central, violation notices stacked neatly, photos with timestamps clipped to each one, and, front and center, the folder of invoices Dan had given me. Every page was another nail in Linda's coffin. Dinners at steakhouses billed to the HOA, maintenance fees suspiciously matching her Range Rover's service records, even a charge for a luxury weekend retreat under the vague label of board development. She's been embezzling from her neighbors, Ellie said, tapping her pen against the invoices. They trusted her to protect property values. Instead, she's been treating HOA funds like her personal credit card. People will eat this up. Still, she warned me, don't underestimate her. People like Linda don't go down quietly. She'll try to twist everything back on you. We need witnesses, not just paper. People willing to speak. That was the tricky part. Everyone hated Linda, but not everyone was ready to stand up to her. Fear was a powerful leash, but slowly, cracks widened. Mrs. Gomez, the woman forced to repaint her front door 3 times, agreed to speak. Dan offered to testify about the solar panels. Even old Mr. Callahan, who'd first called me the night of the crash, promised he'd stand by me if Linda tried to spin lies about the accident. Piece by piece, a coalition formed. The night of the meeting finally arrived. The clubhouse had never seen so many people. Usually these meetings had maybe a dozen board attendees. But that night, every seat was filled, and people lined the walls. The air buzzed with anticipation, like a courtroom before a verdict. Linda strutted in with her board members in tow. She plastered on her best fake smile, chin tilted up as if daring anyone to challenge her authority. But I saw her eyes, darting, calculating, nervous. She knew this wasn't going to be business as usual. The meeting began with her typical monologue about maintaining property values and protecting the integrity of our community. It was the same speech she always gave, but this time the audience wasn't nodding along. They were watching, waiting, hungry for what came next. Then came the open floor. Ellie stood first, crisp, calm, every word measured like a scalpel. She laid out the retaliatory fines I'd received after Tyler's crash. She presented photos, timestamps, letters. She showed how each violation had no basis, how they appeared only after Linda tried to pressure me into lying for her son. Gasps rippled through the room. Linda sputtered, cutting her off. That's a gross misrepresentation. These violations were standard procedure. But Ellie wasn't rattled. She raised her hand, silencing the room with quiet authority. Standard procedure doesn't involve fining a man for the shadow his tree casts on a sidewalk. This was harassment, plain and simple. The crowd murmured, heads nodded, and then, one by one, neighbors began to speak. Mrs. Gomez told her story about the endless door repaints. Dan described the blocked solar panels. Another family revealed how Linda denied their fence request until they hired her brother-in-law's company. Each voice added fuel to the fire, each story confirming what everyone suspected but had been too afraid to say out loud. Linda's mask cracked further with every word. She grew redder, louder, her voice climbing to a shriek. Lies, all of it. You're all ungrateful. Without me, this neighborhood would fall apart. The room wasn't buying it anymore, and then Ellie gave the signal, my cue. I stood, my heart pounding, and held up the folder of invoices. The room hushed instantly. Neighbors, I began, my voice steady. It's not just harassment, it's theft. I opened the folder and read aloud. $1,240 fine dining, $3,600, Range Rover maintenance, $8,200, executive retreat, all billed to the HOA. Gasps, murmurs, a few angry shouts. People turned to each other, faces flushed with anger. Linda tried to lunge forward, her voice shrill. Those are fabrications, out of context. That's all part of normal board operations. But the dam had already burst. People weren't whispering anymore. They were glaring at her. For years, she'd bullied them with fines and threats, and now the truth was out. She wasn't a protector. She was a parasite. And the night wasn't even over yet. The room was electric. People were buzzing, half angry, half thrilled that after years of whispered complaints, Linda was finally being exposed in front of everyone. Her mask of authority, that smug, pearl-draped facade, was unraveling thread by thread. But if you thought she was going to sit quietly and take it, you don't know Linda. She slammed her clipboard onto the table with a crack that echoed through the clubhouse. Enough, she bellowed, her voice straining against the rising tide of outrage. You are all being manipulated by this man. He's bitter, jealous, and trying to destroy the harmony of Willow Creek Estates. Her finger jabbed toward me like a weapon. He flaunts a flashy car, parades around like he's better than us, and now he dares to accuse me of theft? Me? After all the years I've dedicated to protecting this community? I didn't flinch. I just lifted another invoice. $2,750. Spa treatment. Paid by HOA funds. The crowd roared. Some gasped. Some shouted. Mrs. Gomez crossed her arms and muttered loud enough for everyone to hear. Protecting her pores, maybe. Laughter rippled, and Linda's face twisted into a shade of crimson that matched her rage. Her husband, Henry, sat off to the side, hands wringing nervously. He looked like he wanted to melt into the floor. Not once did he defend her. He didn't even look at her, just stared at the table like a man who'd already lost everything. Those were board-approved expenses, Linda shrieked, her voice cracking. Standard, absolutely standard. Ellie calmly adjusted her glasses. Standard expenses do not include personal spa visits, Mrs. Carter. Linda froze for half a second when Ellie used her real name. That tiny stumble, that flicker of recognition in her eyes, was priceless. For the first time, she wasn't in control. Neighbors were no longer just murmuring. They were on their feet. People shouted about their own experiences, demanding explanations, demanding refunds. Years of resentment were boiling over, and the room was seconds away from becoming a riot. And then, just when the chaos was peaking, the double doors of the clubhouse opened with a heavy creak. Every head turned. Sergeant Matthews walked in, flanked by two uniformed officers. The crowd fell into stunned silence. You could hear the shuffle of their boots against the linoleum. Matthews didn't rush. He walked steady, authoritative, the kind of presence that demanded respect without saying a word. He stopped right in front of Linda's table. "Ma'am," he said, voice firm but calm, "we have a warrant for your arrest." You could have heard a pin drop. Linda blinked, her mouth opening and closing like a fish gasping for air. "What? What did you just say?" Matthews pulled a folded document from his pocket. "Obstruction of justice, witness tampering, and potential accessory after the fact." The room erupted. Gasps, shocked whispers, even a few cheers. Someone in the back actually clapped before catching themselves. Linda staggered back, shaking her head violently. "No, no, this is a mistake. This is a conspiracy. They're all lying." The officers moved in, pulling out handcuffs. The metallic click echoed louder than anything else in the room. Linda fought, her voice hitting a shrill pitch. "You can't do this to me. I am this neighborhood. Without me, this place will fall apart. Do you hear me? I am Willow Creek." Nobody moved to help her, not a single person. Even her husband just slumped in his chair, burying his face in his hands like a balloon deflating. When the cuffs locked around her wrists, Linda's screams split the room. "You'll regret this, all of you. You're nothing without me." But the officers let her out, her pearls jangling against her blouse as if mocking her. For a second, the clubhouse was dead silent. Then, like a dam breaking, voices erupted. Relief, anger, laughter. Years of pent-up frustration pouring out in waves. I stood there, the adrenaline finally catching up to me, my hands trembling just slightly. Because in that moment, it wasn't just about my Lamborghini anymore. It wasn't even about Tyler's reckless theft. It was about the entire neighborhood finally standing up against the tyranny of one power-hungry woman. And for the first time in years, Willow Creek Estates breathed. But the story wasn't finished, not by a long shot. The night Linda was dragged out in cuffs became legend almost instantly. By the time the meeting wrapped up, the clubhouse was buzzing like a swarm of bees. Neighbors clustered in groups, whispering, laughing nervously, some still stunned silent. It wasn't just gossip, it was a release. Years of pent-up fear and resentment had been broken open by the sound of handcuffs snapping shut. I stayed seated for a while, watching it unfold. Mrs. Gomez, the woman Linda had once forced to repaint her front door 3 separate times, was practically glowing as she talked to Ellie. A retired Navy man named Carl stood up, slapping the table, shouting, "About damn time!" And others, neighbors who'd barely looked me in the eye before, were suddenly gravitating toward me, patting me on the back, thanking me for standing up to her. It was surreal, For months, I'd been painted as the arrogant car guy with the flashy Lambo who thought he was above the HOA's rules. But in that moment, I wasn't just the guy with the Lamborghini. I was the guy who stood up to the bully when no one else dared. Ellie leaned over, her voice low but sharp. This is just the beginning. Now that she's exposed, you'll see people come crawling out of the woodwork with stories. She wasn't wrong. As the meeting shifted into chaos control mode, motions started flying. Carl demanded an immediate independent audit of the HOA finances. Mrs. Gomez suggested electing an interim president until a full vote could be held. People who hadn't said a word in years were suddenly vocal, standing tall. It was like a revolution, and the tyrant had just been dethroned. Then, in one of the most poetic moments of the night, Mrs. Gomez herself was nominated as interim president. The vote was unanimous. No hesitation, no abstentions, no nervous glances at Linda like in the past. The room clapped, cheered even, and for the first time, I saw genuine hope on the faces of my neighbors. But as the applause died down, my phone buzzed. A text notification lit up the screen from an unknown number. "You'll regret this. You think you've won? You haven't seen the last of us." My stomach sank. Linda was in custody, which meant only one person could have sent that message: Tyler. That night, back at my house, I sat on the edge of my bed staring at the glow of the Porsche brochure on my desk. I'd already started planning the replacement for the Huracan. But the message nagged at me. Tyler wasn't in cuffs. Tyler wasn't finished. And Tyler wasn't nearly as smart as he thought he was. Because while he was busy threatening me, Ellie's investigator had been archiving his social media posts. The bragging, the legendary stunt comments, the grainy photos of him posing in front of my car before he crashed it, every bit of it was documented, time-stamped, and secured. The kid thought he was bulletproof, but really, he was painting a target on his own back, and Linda's downfall had just made him more reckless. The neighborhood might have been breathing easier that night, but I knew in my gut, this war wasn't over. Not yet. The days following Linda's arrest felt like a strange kind of calm, like the eye of a storm. On the surface, things were improving. Neighbors smiled more. The petty violation notices dried up. And for the first time in years, you could hear laughter spilling from front porches instead of whispers about who was getting targeted next. But underneath, I could feel it. That tension, the sense that something was about to snap. It started small. One morning, I walked out to grab the paper and noticed a deep gouge down the side of my truck. Not the Porsche, I hadn't bought it yet, but my workhorse pickup. It looked deliberate, like someone had dragged a key across the paint from headlight to taillight. A neighbor, old Mr. Henderson, shuffled over and said he saw a lanky kid in a hoodie hanging around late last night. He couldn't make out the face, but I didn't need a description. I knew it was Tyler. I reported it, of course, but without proof, the cops could only log it as vandalism. Tyler was smart enough to keep his fingerprints off it, but not smart enough to stay hidden. The next week, things escalated. Someone dumped trash across my driveway. Bags ripped open, garbage strewn everywhere, rotten food, beer cans, even broken glass. It reeked. As I was cleaning it up, I spotted a crushed Monster Energy can with the name Ty scrawled in Sharpie. Real subtle. Ellie wasn't surprised. "This is textbook. Kid loses his shield, his mom, and now he's lashing out. We'll use it, but you've got to stay calm." Calm. Right. Easier said than done. Because then came the night I heard footsteps in my backyard. It was past midnight when the security lights clicked on. I rushed downstairs, heart pounding, grabbed the nearest thing I could use as a weapon, a heavy wrench from my garage, and crept out the back door. The lights flickered across the yard, and for a split second, I saw movement, and near the fence, a figure scrambling over, disappearing into the darkness. The next morning, I checked the footage from the cameras Ellie had insisted I install. There he was, Tyler. Hoodie pulled tight, face partly hidden, but still recognizable. He was holding something, a brick. The footage showed him lifting it, winding up like he was about to hurl it through my window, until the lights snapped on, and he panicked, dropping it in the grass before running. I froze the frame on the brick, because written across it, in thick black marker, was one word: snitch. That wasn't just vandalism, that was a threat. Ellie's response was immediate. We're taking this straight to the cops. Combined with his online posts, we've got him cornered. But while the police began their slow, grinding process, I realized something important. Tyler wasn't just acting out because he was angry. He was desperate. His mom was facing charges that could bury her. The HOA kingdom she ruled was gone, and now his name was being dragged into the spotlight. He wasn't fighting to scare me. He was fighting to stay relevant, to cling to whatever scraps of control he thought he had left. And that made him dangerous. One night, after reviewing footage again, I stood by the window staring at the brick sitting in an evidence bag. I thought about the Lamborghini, smashed and twisted on the roadside. I thought about Linda's smug smirk when she demanded I lie to the cops. And I thought about Tyler, this arrogant, spoiled kid who thought life was one big game he could cheat his way through. But this wasn't a game anymore. This was war, and I wasn't about to let him win the next round. Tyler's brick with the word snitch written across it sat in an evidence bag on my kitchen counter for days. Every time I passed it, I felt the same chill crawl down my spine. It wasn't just a threat, it was a desperate cry from a kid who had lost the safety net of his entitled mother. Without Linda shielding him, Tyler was spiraling. I knew, deep down, this wasn't going to stop until someone stepped in. Ellie wasted no time. She took the footage, the screenshots of his social media posts, and the vandalism reports, and walked them straight into the police station. Sergeant Matthews called me personally 2 days later. His voice was steady, almost tired, like he'd dealt with too many kids like Tyler. We've seen enough. This isn't a prank anymore. It's intimidation, harassment, and a violation of his probation. We're moving forward. The next night, around 9 p.m., I was sitting in my living room, the Porsche brochures still on my coffee table, as I debated what car to buy next. Out of the corner of my eye, I noticed red and blue flashing lights bouncing against the walls. I stood, walked to the window, and sure enough, 2 squad cars pulled up in front of the Carter house. Neighbors began filtering onto porches, whispering, pointing, some even recording on their phones. The Carters' front door swung open, and Sergeant Matthews himself stepped in, flanked by 2 officers. A minute later, they emerged, guiding Tyler out in handcuffs. He wasn't grinning this time. No swagger, no bravado. His head was low, shoulders hunched, and he looked every bit the scared teenager he truly was when stripped of his mother's influence. Linda wasn't there to scream at the cops anymore. No one shielded him. No one shouted about conspiracies. The queen bee was gone, and her little prince was finally on his own. You could hear neighbors murmuring, "About time. Should have happened months ago. That poor Lamborghini." I stood silently at my fence, arms crossed, watching. Tyler glanced up once, and our eyes met. For a split second his glare burned with pure hatred, but underneath it was fear. He tried to pull away from the officers, but they tightened their grip and shoved him gently into the back seat. The door shut, and that was that. The following week, word spread like wildfire. Tyler was placed in juvenile detention, charged with harassment, intimidation, and violating probation. The kid who once bragged online about doing something legendary was now the cautionary tale parents told their kids to stay away from. But it wasn't just about Tyler anymore. His downfall ignited something in Willow Creek. For the first time in years, neighbors felt safe speaking openly. Mrs. Gomez, the woman forced to repaint her door 3 times, started stopping by with cookies and stories about how relieved she was to finally be free of Linda's harassment. Old Mr. Henderson, who had once been fined for keeping a bird feeder in his yard, dusted it off and hung it back proudly. Families planted gardens. Kids rode bikes down the street without parents glaring over their shoulders for fear of complaints. And for once, the HOA board meetings weren't battlefields. Mrs. Gomez, now serving as interim president, ran the HOA with honesty and warmth. Instead of talking about property values and aesthetics, she spoke about community, safety, and making the neighborhood a place where people wanted to live, not fear living. It was like breathing fresh air after years of choking smog. And Linda? Her story was far from over. The audit revealed she had siphoned thousands from HOA funds. Lavish dinners billed as board meetings. Spa visits marked down as maintenance expenses. Even repairs on her Range Rover charged to HOA accounts. The prosecutors had a field day. She wasn't just facing obstruction and witness tampering charges anymore. Embezzlement was added to her list. Neighbors who once trembled at her knock now showed up at court to testify against her. Each story painted the same picture: a woman who ruled not with fairness, but with fear and greed. Eventually, Linda was sentenced. Gone was the Range Rover, the pearls, the smug smirk. Her husband filed for divorce, and she slipped quietly out of Willow Creek, working retail in another town. A woman who once strutted through HOA meetings like royalty now scanned barcodes for a living. As for me, the insurance company came through. And while I could have replaced the Lamborghini with another Huracan, I chose differently. I bought a Porsche 911 Turbo S, sleeker, quieter, less of a target, but every bit as thrilling. Sometimes I park it in the driveway on a sunny Saturday morning and polish it while sipping coffee. Neighbors walk by, smile, wave, and we chat like normal people do. No tension, no fear of fines, just community. Every now and then, though, my eyes drift to the spot on the curb where the Lamborghini once sat before Tyler took it on his reckless joyride. I remember the screeching tires, the flashing lights, the crunch of metal, and Linda standing in my driveway demanding I pay for her son's mistake. And then I remember the sound of handcuffs snapping shut in the packed clubhouse, the gasps of neighbors who had finally seen the tyrant fall, and the silence that followed before the room erupted into hope. It cost me a Lamborghini, sleepless nights, and a long fight, but what I gained was far more valuable: peace, justice, a neighborhood reborn. So I'll ask you this. Was I right to push back against Linda and Tyler every step of the way, to risk more conflict instead of just letting it go? Or should I have rolled over and paid the price just to keep the so-called peace? I think I know the answer, but I want to hear yours. Drop your thoughts in the comments below. Because use stories like this, they're more common than you think. And trust me, this isn't the last HOA horror story I'll be sharing.